Yeah, so here comes the slides. Oh, okay, now it's being live streamed. And so obviously our intent today is to get feedback from you all about the 2024 budget. And we're going to be focusing on three main areas, which will be events, personnel, and the CIP. And based on the discussion that we have today, we as a staff will go back, incorporate any comments, changes, or anything else that comes from you, and we will present a draft budget that will go public on the 1st of the month. During the time of October, we'll have that open for public comment. We'll be advertising it through our usual channels, social media, our website, weekly email blasts, things of that nature for the public to be able to review this meeting if they choose to, and other information. We'll have a more condensed video that they'll be able to watch that will give the highlights of the budget to them, so that they don't necessarily have to watch a 2.5 hour long work session to get the quick version, the cliff notes of our budget. We would say that this would not be your only or last chance to give input to the budget, but this is probably your best chance to get input into the budget based on the timing and the format that we have in front of you today. Yeah, with that, I think we're ready for the next slide. So this shows you kind of where we have been, where we are, and where we are going. From starting in June until this point, it's been predominantly a staff effort. That's how we've come to the information that's presented to you now today. And this, as I just mentioned, we'll have that draft budget you see for October. November and December, historically, we've just had the one council meeting. So we would use the November meeting to do the first reading and setting of a public hearing with final adoption at the meeting of December. All right, and that brings us to a budget summary. Are you doing that? Mm-hmm. All right, so Lisa's going to talk to you a little bit about some of the specific numbers.
First, I want to thank all staff. This has been going on since late May, early June, and a lot of effort goes into putting these numbers together. We have a lot of discussion, a lot of work and effort goes into putting these numbers together. So I want to thank everyone for your work up to this point. I'm just going to provide an overall summary of the proposed budget. We anticipate our beginning fund balance to be $40,774,148. Our projected revenue right around 31 million. As noted in some of the assumptions that I outlined in your memo, one big impact might be the proposition HH that's on the ballot in November. We'll have a little bit more data by the end of this week from the county, and then we'll know for sure in November after the election what the impacts of our revenue will be related to that. Other than that, we used the conservative approach to budgeting that we typically have. We did take a finer point in looking at sales tax numbers and projected a little bit slower growth because we anticipate some other retailers opening in the area that might impact some of our local retailers here. So we just took a little finer point on the sales tax numbers this year. And then when it comes to expenditures, these are inclusive of all staff requests that we'll review later, all of the new position requests, increases that we're seeing across the board, and then some new strategic initiatives that you'll see in your packet, new financial software, primarily a PROST master plan, and some other things that tie back to the strategic plan. Then we'll end the year with a projected ending fund balance of around 22 million. When we put our 2024 budget together, we also look at 5-year projections to make sure we're meeting our working reserve policy across those 5 years. So we plug in our staffing projections, our capital plan, operating expenditures, and forecast revenue across those 5 years. And as you can see by the chart, we're meeting the minimum reserve policy in all 5 years of 25%, and then with the goal of 50. So the lowest year is 2028, and that's around 32%. That will ebb and flow based on CIP projects and so forth, but that's why we have that reserve. And that's all I had just for an overview. We can turn it over to events, or I can answer any questions prior to then.
Just to clarify, going back a slide to the total numbers. Mm-hmm. My understanding was we have a number of capital projects that were deferred from last year, which is why our projected expenditures are quite a bit higher than our revenues this year.
Yeah, our expenditures are 49 million and the CIP is close to 30 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And then with our going back to the reserve slide there, I know you've mentioned this year's budget accounts for the come and go opening. Are there any other businesses that we're accounting for opening in that 5-year window?
I have not included any of those projections.
No additional businesses. Okay.
No. Just anything that I anticipated being complete by the end of this year.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Council, if you have any other questions on the big picture of the numbers there. Okay, I think we're good to go to events.
Okay, I just wanted to start by saying we decided during budget planning that we wanted to have council take a stab at this because we looked at the 2022 actuals, it was right around 600,000. And then when we were looking at the proposed option A that you'll see in your packet, it was well over $1 million. So we just wanted council to take a stab at it and revisit goals around events and then get your input on what that looked like for next year.
I guess you have slides here. Do you want to go through or is this Callie first here?
We're going to turn it over
Callie
to
and
Kim and
Okay.
Kelly.
I'll let you take it away first here.
Not yet. No, thank you, Council, for having us here today. I'm actually engaged in this process because we do look at community events as a way to engage the community, and it kind of falls under that communications umbrella. So as Lisa mentioned, we wanted to have this discussion with you because as we have in years past, we always want to check in and make sure that the events that we're producing are actually meeting your goals as council and meeting our goals in terms of community engagement. And so just to ground us a little bit, we actually do include events as part of our strategic goals and our strategic plan. And then we also set specific goals for events themselves. Now, we haven't talked about these goals since 2020, but we put them up here today just to do a gut check and see if these are still in alignment with where council wants to go. Now, as we talk about how we move forward, and I don't have a clicky, it's the scientific name for it. But as we talk about how to move forward, we really wanted to put together an event recommendation that accomplished these goals, but was really sensitive to the financial output that we dedicate to events. So Callie and Courtney did yeoman's work on really trying to figure out how do we still hold true to these goals, but be really thoughtful about the palette that we put forth. Now, a couple of things as we have this discussion, there's some events that are just, we either do them or we don't, right? It's really hard to scale Citizens Academy unless we just don't want, Brian to have a night there. So some of these events are yes or no. We've called those fixed budget events. We can decide to do them or we can decide not to do them. We have some events that are variable budget events. So those we can scale. We can take a look at, do we do option 1, 2, or 3. So when we look at these things like cleanup day, in option 1, that still includes the 2 dates for cleanup day. In option 2, that scales down to 1, right? Movies in the park. Again, we can say we're doing 3. Thank you. 3 movies for option 1, 2 for option 2, or just 1 for option 3. 4th of July, again, we can scale it back minimally. Fall festival and holiday event, these 2 are actually really important because if we scale them back, quote unquote, they're actually different events. So it's not the fall festival that you would know. Option 1 sure is, but the fall festival in option 2 is really just a different fall time event. It still accomplishes a lot of what we do at fall festival in terms of bringing people together, but just so your expectations, so you understand what choices you're making. Same with holiday event festival. So as I mentioned, I think Callie and Courtney did a really, I'm doing it on my computer, which is great. No, I'm not connected to that. I think Callie and Courtney did a great job with really trying to figure out what could be the proposal that we put forth to all of you that helps us maintain a lot of that community feel and community engagement while also trying to scale back the budget. And so I won't go through all of these numbers with you, but what you can see here is there's a couple of key differences. First and foremost, we would replace the Holiday Lighting Festival with another event. Many of you might know that it's getting really, really crowded down there during our Holiday Lighting Festival. And frankly, that event has probably outgrown that venue. We also know it's like such a great event, right? And everyone loves it. So we are suggesting having a different event during that time period and engaging the downtown businesses to talk about what does that look like and how can we still provide value and do something that's beneficial during that time period. We're also suggesting a decrease in the CYO Winter Wonderland funding. You'll recall that we started that program, I'm going to say 2 years ago, maybe 3. There's certainly a little bit now more established and up and running, and we feel confident that that experience will be just as great, even if we do scale back our funding. Third, there is a decrease from the fall festival, as I mentioned before, and really just doing that more as like a beefed up ice cream social. Is that the best way to describe that? Okay. And then all the other events we would keep the same. So remember I talked about those go, no go events. We actually think they add value to what we're trying to accomplish. And so we've kept those the same in this budget. That's the groundwork. Obviously, Callie and Courtney are here to answer any of the detailed questions, and I'm happy to ask or answer questions about how this fits into largely what we're trying to accomplish.
So I think there's a couple pieces here, and I'd like us as a council here to examine them a little bit separately. Staff mentioned how they're looking at scaling down a couple of these events, and the reason why is because, as they put it, our events budget has been growing at an unsustainable level. You know, in 2022, it was under $600,000, and had the exact same events this year, it'd be over $1 million. So I guess first thing I would ask council to weigh in on, as we're trying to get general direction of the staff, is how do we feel about the general financial approach that we're making to our overall events budget? And I'll kind of open that up. And then after that, we can kind of go into the specifics of the proposed budget.
Brett, just to clarify, are you asking, do we support the scaling down rather than keeping it as that scaled up? Is that the general first topic?
Are you talking about wanting to keep it at dollars, or you want to scale back more? Do you think the staff 4 or 6% a year? Just those big picture numbers first before we dive into the specifics.
Yeah. Thank you. I definitely support the idea of not growing it at 18 to 20%. I understand there's value to this community and it's great events. I enjoy attending those events, but I do think I would support a scaled back budget in that sense and reviewing the line items and looking at it. So I would support that first step of not taking it to $1 million, but looking at other options.
I would agree. I know the first few times that we had the fall festival, even when it was in the park, we didn't always have the rides. We didn't always have as many things, but I like still having a certain maybe number of events. I'm not sure what that looks like. You are the experts in that. And so I would certainly like to hear some suggestions or recommendations. I wouldn't mind even looking like outside the box to see what kinds of things some other communities do. I know there's, Fort Collins holds food truck rallies, I would like to, whether it's a holiday event or something else, somehow incorporate something into the Old Town area, whether it's something. I know Windsor does a bunch of events in their downtown area where whether it's their wine nights or their chocolate Valentines or something to get people into the businesses. So I know you mentioned talking to the businesses to see kind of what might work there. And so I definitely think space wise in Old Town to have the reindeer and the rides and all that certainly gets crowded. I do have one quick question. As far as like all of the events we have, do we have a record of how many we've had to cancel due to whether it's weather or other things? Because I do think obviously we have to pay a certain amount of money no matter what, even if we end up canceling it. But if there's something that's been canceled consistently, maybe we relook at that timing or something like that as well. But I would be interested in looking to see what some kind of the options are of maintaining or not increasing as quickly and significantly.
Yeah, I think we do need to be financially responsible as much as the events are fantastic and outstanding and so popular. You know, I like the goals that were identified in 2020, which is that, you know, these are town-focused events aimed at attracting people from the town to be able to enjoy the town together. They're not an attempt to market Timnath to others. We're not intending to attract folks from surrounding communities. Again, not that we want to exclude them, but I do look at the 4th of July, for example. That's obviously our most expensive event, and the fireworks show is just amazing, right? But we draw and provide that service to a lot of folks outside of Timnath. And the show's great, but I think maybe there's probably some room to scale that back. I also do worry about the cost, the sunk cost when we don't have events because of weather usually. You know, last year we lost the tree ceremony. And, you know, that was essentially, I mean, we spent all that money and didn't get an event out of it. And although we got our fireworks at the 4th of July, the concert and all that stuff wasn't there. So I do think we need to relook at this. I'm wondering if, you know, 4th of July specifically, if we try to determine what is the value of that event, what do we really enjoy? Is it the fireworks itself? Is it putting on the concert? Is it having the bouncy houses and stuff like that? And then, you know, identify what that priority is and then focus the event more towards that. You know, so maybe it becomes the drive-in style if the real benefit is the fireworks, or if the real benefit is the community gathering and the bouncy houses. Great, we can do all that, but maybe the show can't be what it's always been. But regardless, yeah, I think we need to rein in the spending on this.
Okay. So if I'm catching everybody correctly, you know, the staff proposed basically an $850,000 budget for events this year, plus a one-time $40,000 expense for a trailer. Sounds like we're generally okay with that being our target number for this year. So since we're working within that budget, we can kind of talk about the specifics of the staff proposed event calendar this year. I'll at least start up by sharing Mark's comments that he sent over to me, just so everyone would have those, and then we can open that up. He said he was okay with if we got rid of one or both of the cleanup days, the movie in the park series. He would like to keep the fall festival the same as it's been on the same scale we've kept it, and as well as the 4th of July. He believes that those are signature events and that those are needed as part of creating a town spirit and town community. So I've passed along his comments, but let's open it up. We might have a bit to hash out which events we want to have or not have. So whoever wants to go first on the specifics here, I'll pass on.
Can I ask a question? So if we look at option 1, 2, and 3, is this like an a la carte look at this? So as presented, like cleanup day, are you asking council to pick option 1, 2, or 3, or can we select 3, 1, 2 throughout that? Is that
The latter.
Okay.
Yeah. So we wanted to put together our best proposal in that entire package, but we also understand that you are very closely connected to residents. You probably hear a lot about what events they want, which ones they don't. So we wanted to offer you some flexibility in terms of picking and choosing from all of those options per event. So you can choose option 1 for July 4th, option 2 for Fall Festival. We could look at all of those combinations.
To Mark's comment about the cleanup day, do you have a sense? I feel like that's one of our more attended, like just in terms of everybody bring their stuff out. Is there a sense that maybe people are coming in from outside the community, or do you guys feel comfortable saying that cleanup day is all Timnath residents, that it's really a resident benefit event?
I would guess the majority of the people are coming in from Timnath. We have a lot of people who bring their either IDs or their utility bills or their postcard to prove that they are residents.
Okay.
So I would guess that most people are Timnath residents.
Okay. And to kind of Robert's point earlier, is there maybe events that you look at besides 4th of July that we draw Northern Colorado to as well?
I would say first and foremost, 4th of July, then Fall Fest. CYO, you have to be a Timnath resident to
free.
utilize the code. Sorry, so first, 4th, then fall, and then by 3rd, we get a little bit of outside people for holiday lighting. But with that having to change, it doesn't really.
I support Lisa's comments about at least looking at a downtown event. I think that that's very important. I like the idea of engaging businesses and getting that feedback and that support and figuring out what will work best for them. So, you know, it's hard for me to look at a cost on that, but I do think something would be reasonable looking at option 2 in that, just as a budget for me. I look at the 4th of July. I do think I would look at scaling this back, but I would look at a long-term scaling it back. I would think for 2024, maybe keeping option 1 and then start to really look at what things are, or maybe you guys know what are really popular there. Is it the bounce house? Is it the food trucks or whatever that may be there? And maybe taking a look on like a couple year wind down of the things that are less important to citizens. Do we have a survey coming up this next year? So.
Sorry, yes, in the budget, there will be a community survey next year in 2024.
So I'm willing to look, because I think 4th of July is a great event and I'm willing to get community feedback on that of what we can scale back in that sense. Movies in the park, my general feeling on that is I would like to, I know Wild Wing we're going to have a Wild Wing park. I look at maybe scaling this back and then thinking about how we could put this in different parts of the town as well. So that we can benefit other residents or even, so looking to a future state of that, and I'm willing to scale that one back to option 2 or 1 or option 2 or 3 and looking ahead to the future and saying, maybe we could do it somewhere else as we save some money this year. So yeah, I generally support, cleanup day is option 1. I'd look at movies in the park as, 2 or 3, 4th of July, option 1. And then the fall festival, if I understand correctly, so moving it to the reservoir is the 147, but the 115 is in Timnath Community Park.
Yeah, so the
Okay.
reason we have the option 1 for moving it to the reservoir is that allows for us to scale up because we've kind of hit our max capacity at the community park. Option 2 keeps us with what you'll see this year or what you saw last year, very similar. And then option 3 is changing the event completely and having it be more of like an ice cream social feel, but fall themed.
Yeah, so I would support 2 or 3 on that.
I'm not trying to spend more money, but I wasn't here when the decision was made when we shifted from the evening concerts to the movies in the park. Was that COVID driven? Was that cost driven?
Yeah, it's a great question. We canceled them all during COVID. And then we came back and had a brainstorm with council again in terms of what are some small scale events that we could do that would bring people together. And I don't necessarily think it was we need to get rid of the concerts. I think it was hey, a lot of communities do movies at the park. They're relatively, I'm not going to say easy. They're easier than, let's say, a July 4th. They're contained. They're often family oriented. So we were kind of trying to reach that demographic. So I think it was more just hey, we think that's a good route as opposed to let's replace A with B.
And I agree that movies in the park are
are relatively cost effective. At least for me and my kiddos are still younger. It's just them being later in the evening. You know, we probably don't attend as much as we would if it were something earlier in the evening. I really do like Luke's idea about maybe keeping those, but targeting them at different locations. So I would support that. I feel like the cleanup day is well utilized, and I think folks get a lot of benefit from that. So I'd like to see that stay. I think realistically for me, it's just such a big budget item. We really need to look, seriously at the 4th of July. And when it comes to Fall Fest, whether we're moving that, look at moving that to the reservoir or not, I think we have to then start to think about, do we want to make the reservoir a event destination place? And if so, are we investing in infrastructure? Because when we do these 1 or 2 off events, we're bringing in a lot of infrastructure to do that. And so if we look at an option that moves Fall Festival out there, I think, maybe we need to look at a CIP plan to do some infrastructure out there. So just keep that in mind. It's not a lot of money, but I think, your point is well received that the Winter Wonderland is probably doing okay on its own. I also get the sense that most people that make use of that probably go out there and make a donation as well. And so, I think we can scale that back a little bit.
So as far as the specific ones, cleanup day, I would be fine going back to 1, but maybe kind of do it mid-year or something like that. But I think if we were to do that, we need to make sure that we have the resources there. Because I know in the past, there have been times where my husband and I went to drop off a mattress and they weren't taking mattresses anymore. So that's my one concern about cutting that back to 1, is that how logistically would it be able to take everything that people are dropping off that one time? And again, I think Luke said it too, that if that one's highly utilized, I know we've shown ID going in, and I think that's fine to show ID or ask people to show some kind of proof that they live in town. If that's like a highly utilized one, I feel like that might be one to maybe stick with the 2. Movies in the park, I've been to a few of those that have been canceled. So that's the one I was kind of thinking about, but at the same time, as we get more parks, it would be kind of nice to move it around or somehow incorporate the concerts again. I don't typically go to the movies. One, I don't like the mosquitoes, so I kind of try to avoid that. And then typically they're not the movies I would be watching. So that one, 4th of July, obviously that's our high ticket one. I would love to hear some ideas of options of what we can do to perhaps scale that back a little bit. Fall Festival, I know that's changed and morphed over the years. I know there used to be a run associated with it. I don't know if that would be something that would be popular again. We have probably 7, 8 times as many people in town as we did the last time we did something like that. And that also potentially helps offset the costs. Though I'm not sure it actually does. I can't remember if it actually did or not, but and then for the holiday event, I think just space wise, we have to probably at some point do something. So I would say those are kind of the ones that I would think about. I mean, if we're doing the movies in the park or a concert in the park, I also look at, do we also need to do an ice cream social? Like, do we need 4 or 5 events in the summer? Which is basically, I think we're up to 5 events in the summer with 4th of July, ice cream social, 3 movies. Like maybe we do 2 events in the summer, and whether it's combining pieces or something related to that would kind of be my suggestion. But I I like the idea of asking community members on a survey. So, kind of taking this next year to really kind of look at that and reevaluate and look at some other options.
So for the 4th of July, I mean, the bulk of those costs are the fireworks, right? I mean, when we're looking at that option 2, that's 233 instead of the 314. That's the fireworks is what we're paying for, right?
Yeah, your bulk of the is fireworks. And then like Robert was talking about, the infrastructure that we have to bring in is a really large portion of our budget, like the light towers and porta potties and things of that nature. So that's kind of why when you're seeing us drop back to option 2, which is the drive-in theater style, it's not that huge of a drop off, even though it's changing the feel of the event drastically.
Okay. So at that point, it's just people come, they park, they tailgate, whatever. There's nothing up there except porta potties, lights, and fireworks.
We've included to keep the band.
And a band.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just exactly, I don't know if you guys came 2021 where we had the band and we projected it out into the parking lot. It'd be the same thing. So it could still be a pyro musical.
Okay. So here's I guess here are kind of my thoughts on some of these here. In the end, we are looking to tighten the belt a little bit. So it means potentially cutting off some events that we've liked, that have been successful and been popular, but we can't spend $1 million on events this year. That's just not something we're in a position to do. I would like to keep the fall festival or event at a similar scale to what we are doing this year, option 2. So I would go from 45 to 115. I do think it's a really good event, and it's been popular, whether it's been in Old Town or in the park. It's been a really good one. Where I would suggest we consider cuts, I think potentially one cleanup day would be still a very valuable service to the town. I would think the Winter Wonderland, the Colorado Youth Outdoors, that sponsorship could be on the table as well. The reason we started that was a COVID thing. We weren't having any event down in Old Town for Christmas. And, I went to their sponsorship dinner last year and they had a lot of sponsors. I'm fairly confident they don't need us anymore to be successful. So yes, it's an event I like that we can get in, but it's still going to be there and people can still pay to go to it. I think that should be on the table. I think the movie in the park series, there are things I like about it for sure. And this kind of leads a little bit into what Luke said. At the moment, it seems a little Timnath Ranch focused. And no, it's not a big dollar item, but it is $15,000 if we're looking to try to stay in a budget. I consider that on the table. And then, the 4th of July, I'm fine with what you've done for this year. And I like that we're going to do a survey so we can kind of get reoriented with which events people consider popular. So that would be kind of where I would lean towards. Let's do that option 2 on the fall event, and then look at where we're cutting some of these smaller activities. Essentially have those 2 main events, the 4th of July, the fall festival, keep a holiday event, and then the smaller events kind of work around what we've got room for in the budget would be kind of my thoughts. So now trying to kind of sum up where everybody was at. I think we had some different thoughts on the movie in the park. It sounded like this year people are okay with either having it, not having it, but in the future we want to look at, I would say expanding it would be the term I would use with how people talked about it. And then feel free to pipe in if people disagree with how I'm summing it up. The fireworks, I don't know that we have a consensus on the 4th of July event. I don't know that we have a real consensus on for it this year. I heard some mixed opinions. I lean towards keeping as the option 1, the larger event. If somebody has opinions contrary to that, whether we should scale down right now this year, or is this something we need to look at for future years, that maybe after the survey or something like that. Looks like people are okay with keeping that as the option 1. And then the fall event, I guess, would be the other potentially large dollar item with the events. You use the option 3, the smallest possible event. I mean, I would even say, similar to Lisa, like if we're just going to do something on the scale of the ice cream social, let's cut the ice cream social and make the fall festival a little bit bigger, if need be. But my feelings are, let's keep it as the option 2, the same scale event that we are having now, and cut other events as necessary. Yeah, I'm getting head nods or lack of negative nods. So, so that'd be the guidance that I think we're giving is keep option one on the fireworks, option two on the fall festival. And then the smaller events need to be scaled down or cut as necessary to fit within that budget that you're proposing. And some of the ideas were the Colorado Youth Outdoors, moving the park, one of the cleanup days, the ice cream social if necessary. I think those are some of the ideas that were out there. Okay. Is that good instruction for you?
Yes, I think we can do that. I can't help myself. I do have to say to the folks watching, like, we know how important events are to this community. And one of the things that Courtney and Callie have been helping us figure out with all of these events is how to pick the event and do it well. And that's sort of our commitment to these accessible and safe and high quality events, regardless of what that budget turns out to be. So I can't help myself. I have to say to all of the people watching that we know how important these are. We're gonna work really hard to make those events as best as they can be within the context of what they're supposed to be. And so we'll come back with a more fine-tuned list for you next time we talk budget, and we'll make sure to include all the details of what's actually in there.
Okay.
And you take one more swipe at it.
Okay. I appreciate that. And I mean, in the end, we are still spending $850,000 on events. It's not like we're turning into, no fun town here. So we're still doing a bit on it. Thank you so much for all you prepared. And this was all very easy to follow and easy to explore alternatives. Thank you.
I have one more comment. It's not related specifically to the budget. At least I don't think it will be, but as far as all of the council chat series, when we schedule those out for next year, can we look at having them at different venues around town? I know I've talked to a couple of you about that, but I liked that we were at Backyard Bird, and I think we could reach out to the public market. We could reach out to Timnath Beer Works, the church, and just kind of maybe move those around a little bit. Probably won't affect the budget, I wouldn't think, but just to take note of that.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. With that, Aaron, personnel.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk personnel just a little bit. We've changed the slide to help with this discussion a little bit. So there's really just a few points I'm going to try and make to try and set up any conversation or questions that you as the council might have. What you have in front of you now would be changes to personnel. So the town is growing and that's driving new positions. We're also following a plan that came from the council that positions that historically had been contracted are coming in-house. And so these two factors are really sort of driving that growth that we're seeing in positions. And I would say specifically, we're seeing a lot in terms of our police department with that goal of getting to 24/7 coverage. So we're seeing growth there. The expectation and hope is that that will happen in the first quarter of 2024. And then, like I say, this switch from a contracted model, historically the town has used, to more of an in-house model. Specifically, TST has been a big part of Timnath historically. There's been a plan that has been started since I have started with the town to continue to reduce our cost and reliance on TST and other contractors. We do continue through that. We have made some hires that have led us down that path, including Justin Stone, who's with us. He started last week. He is the Timnath Public Works Director and Town Engineer. Bringing Kevin from TST to in-house, and we will have the position of Community Development Director opening soon. And so we continue on that path. The current TST contract does have a renewal it's an auto renewal for next year unless the council were to take action. The staff recommendation would be to take that auto renewal. We think to make a change at this time by completely cutting off TST would lower the level of service, not just for us as a staff who work with TST, but to our community partners and developers. I also think we could say it would result in an actual increase in expenditure and not a decrease of expenditure to change so abruptly. But with that, we do recommend an RFP for engineering and other services provided by TST that would happen basically this time next year and would incorporate as part of our 2025 budget. We think by doing that timing, the scope will be significantly smaller and some of those critical positions will have been filled internally, making the transition much smoother for us, for our developers, and financially smoother for the town. Last piece I wanted to touch on. This budget you see in front of you does include a 5%. So we would be able to give an up to 5% increase for our employees. That is consistent with what we're seeing from our peer communities. We find inflation is still very high. The market for employees continues to be very competitive. We're seeing that from, like I say, our neighboring and peer communities. And so that's how we have it budgeted, is that it could be an up to 5% for our personnel. Yeah, I think that's the highest level. Again, I didn't want to call out these positions specifically, that we do have them in front of you. I think the ones I would call out again would just to be the additional PD positions with that first quarter goal. We talked a little bit about the community development director. We also have slated a senior engineer, and while that won't replace a contracted position directly, it will be another step in reducing that load from TST. So with that, that's the high level approach to personnel. And I'll stop there and see if you guys have any questions or comments, or if anything else we'd like to discuss maybe in more detail.
Pass this on to you guys to start this one.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you outlining the status of the TST contract as well as the commitment or desire to put that out for RFP at the end of essentially for the 2025 fiscal year. This year, so Kevin's position was converted from contract to in-house. What other positions did we convert this year?
So we're working on the transition from Don, and then Matt as community development director will also happen. His load has actually already been lightened by Tom Casal, who's over our Parks and Rec director. So those are some of the positions. It didn't directly replace a TST employee, but we have Corey Flood, who has joined as our first in-house engineer. So those are steps we've been taking to reduce the TST currently. And like I say, the community development position coming up for 2020.
So 2024, the one position that will remain converted is the community development director, correct?
Correct.
So then when we look to go out to RFP for 2025, what will that RFP look like in terms of what services are we still anticipating needing to contract, whoever that is?
So I think there's a lot to still be figured out in terms of having Justin as brand new, but I do anticipate there will be the same services we have now at a smaller scale. I think I was actually talking with Luke earlier today. So I used to work for the city of Mesa, a place that had dozens of in-house engineers. They always had an on-call contract for engineering services. I don't know that it would never be fiscally responsible to think that Timnath will ever cover all of its engineering needs. So I anticipate we'll always have some sort of contract in engineering. I think that's probably going to be true to some extent with community development as well. So our expectation is that those will reduce, obviously, from where they are with TST. It's difficult for me to articulate specific dollar amounts or how those positions will work beyond what we know for 24.
And I think, probably makes sense to contract those positions that are specialized or may not encompass an FTE, right? You mentioned an ongoing need for community development. What does that look like? Can you talk about what that need is?
Well, the thing that comes first and foremost to my mind, and Matt, you could jump in if you feel so inclined, but I think about the services we have from Safe Build. At this point, I don't anticipate staff would ever recommend going away from that service. That becomes a very specialized need. Outside of that, I think there could be opportunities or occasions where we might need to pick up the phone for a very specialized instance. I don't know that I have a specific dollar amount in mind. I think the bulk of that could be in-house. I think that is the plan that's laid out in front of you. I think there's value in having what I would call maybe a shock absorber. So for instance, if we have anyone who's doing contract work for us and the market were to slow down, obviously that can be the first person out, versus what's more realistic or more likely, in my opinion, to happen is a ramping up. And so we could bring in somebody who could 6 or 12 month with the intention that we're getting through a spike.
I noticed when you did the SWOT analysis, one of the items that was identified there as a threat is potential attrition of experienced staff members to alternative opportunities. And, is this something that you are seeing as we want to be cautious? It's a threat that's out there, or is this something that we're really worried about right now, losing our talent?
I think there's always a concern of that. I think in some specific areas and departments, there's more sensitivity in the market than in others. I think about our police department specific. So, there's some poaching of employees happening. And at this point, we're actually poaching a lot more than we're being poached. But, I think there's always going to be it's difficult to find good people. And I think we're seeing it with our engineering field as well. We're going to have to see how that senior engineer shakes out, but I anticipate that will be a difficult position to fill.
I do have questions about the police stuff. Maybe it makes sense to stay on some of the community development stuff before we move on.
So, Aaron, looking at, I really appreciate the color coding that came along this year with the staffing. I see a lot of promotions in there. I think a great retention tool kind of to that SWOT analysis that we talked about is career ladders and paths. So I absolutely appreciate that. As a council member, and I throw this out to other council members, is I think as we look at our staffing, I would almost like to get to a benchmarking state. So we're comparing ourselves maybe to town with like residents, town with like revenue, or town with, internal town staff, so that we can look and say, yep, for an HR person, 70 is appropriate, because I think we're targeting 71. So one HR person is appropriate. Or looking at other departments, I'd like to maybe get into a little more benchmarking in that sense. I appreciate growth, but I don't want to grow in areas that isn't benchmarked in certain areas. And I know there's always work. I'm not questioning that. So maybe that's something as council we could look into from a growth perspective, is getting a little more benchmarking, if you guys would support that type of work. And I think you guys benchmark all of your salaries against CML, right? So I feel comfortable with salaries, but I want to get your council thoughts on that, of if it's worth, as we, look at these and we're talking about approval positions, trying to benchmark ourselves against others, if possible. I know that can be difficult and you sometimes have to cherry pick some of that, but I'd like to get your guys' thoughts on that.
I think there's certainly value in like comparisons. I would think the only caveat I would throw out there is I imagine Timnath's in a pretty unique spot in a lot of ways. I mean, we're a town of a little less than 10,000 now, and we're going to spend $50 million this year. And the relative financial status of people in the community means people expect certain levels of service with parks, we're looking at recreational programming. there's a lot of unique aspects to our town. So I just simply think that any benchmarks would need to have context with it to know where they're good, valid comparisons or not. And maybe you know towns that are just like Timnath. I don't know, but I don't know of any in the area. So.
And if I could, and Luke, tell me if I'm out in left field, but I think we try to do a reasonability check for anything, you know, and I think the staff has heard me say, we don't want to go for new positions until we know we need them. Okay. And I do appreciate a good benchmark as much as anybody. It is very difficult, not only finding comparable sized, but, you know, so I think of some of our neighbors here. So for example, Severance, well, they offer a completely different set of services. For example, we don't do water and sewer, but they do. They have an integral part into their fire service in terms of tying in with Windsor. Off the tip of my tongue, I don't know how they handle police service, whether they rely on their county sheriff's department or not. So even though we have a relatively similar population, they're going to be very difficult for us to benchmark without certain caveats. Okay. The other thing, sort of, I think to Brett's point, it's not just an expectation of service, it's a level of complication. So as a growing community, if you take us at 10,000 versus a 10,000 Eastern Plains community with little to no growth, it's just going to be a fundamentally different animal, because when nothing's happening, less people can run the ship, versus when things are blowing up all around you, you're going to need all hands on deck. And so I think we'll continue to want to do those checks, and we're happy to continue to try and pursue that. It will be difficult to find that unicorn that's very Timnath-esque. That's the only caution I would advise you of.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And that's why I'm looking for feedback. You know, I think some of them, you know, just, you know, I look at your position, Aaron, and you know, where looking ahead to future years and what the work is. And I think that some of those would be easy to benchmark against, like an HR, you know, number of people, right? So yeah, if we could just maybe understand that some will be easier to do and some will be harder to do, I would just like to see it. So as we get into future years and future growth, it's something maybe we can put out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, I guess one question I had, mentioned the packet here, merit components of our, you know, you mentioned 5% up to a maximum pay increase of 5% for employees in 2024. Market merit components of this will be determined with HR and finance prior to January. Do we have any indicator yet on merit, or is that still, we don't know what we might be looking at?
Well, we think the 5% will be reasonable. The specific makeup of what would be what I would call COLA, cost of living, versus merit, we haven't tried to get to that point yet. Okay. I think within HR, myself, Lisa, we'll talk about that. I think we'll talk with our department heads, frankly, too, and seeing what seems reasonable. We want them to have some discretion as supervisors relative to their employees. And we do have budgeted in this budget, the 24 budget, for a salary survey to benchmark from that standpoint, okay, making sure that we're competitive and reasonable.
Okay. With the Parks and Rec program coordinator, what's our budget like for event programs to be coordinated?
There's a new line items associated with that, and there's 72,000 for software, equipment, and supplies for that. And the master plan will help guide what programming that looks like.
Okay, and whoever the coordinator would be would probably also weigh heavily on that. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
I don't really have too many questions related to that Parks and Rec. When we get further into the budget, the pros committee did talk a little bit about what that piece might look like. And I know that'll be in the budget to do a master plan related to that. So I also, as far as like the benchmarks for salary, just to touch on, I mean, not on salary, but on positions, just to touch on that. I don't feel as strongly about needing benchmarks, but I do like that there's some kind of process to really evaluate whether a position is needed. So, and I feel like in the past, we've certainly done that and kind of really looked at, is this position needed? Is it something that will be permanent? Is it something we can fill temporarily, that kind of thing? So I would just say that's kind of fine with me going at it in that same direction. So, and that's all I have.
Aaron, can you just speak to the network administrator and the work you did behind that? I saw you were working with, is it Larimer County that you work with that on?
Lisa might actually.
Okay.
Yeah, we worked with Larimer County. We worked with Mark Pfaffinger towards the end of last year and the beginning of this year to try and come up with a plan to put out an RFP for the future of Timnath IT needs. And it was immediately recognized that we really need an in-house IT person to help guide that. But also at the same time, we're growing, the number of employees are growing. And it's sort of an other duties as assigned for a lot of people in town. So I can name probably 5 people, 3 in this room, Brian, Desire, Robert Weinkoop over at the PD that kind of fill that role. And we really need a central IT person to manage that. And the reason I landed on network administrator was because we need that higher level awareness of networks so that way they can immediately realize some cost savings from CoreCat at the PD and then help guide the rest of the needs that we have throughout the town.
And it's CoreCat that's our IT.
Yes.
And there's no plans and changes service from them through this
Well,
process?
we hope that there will be some changes. I don't know if it'll be away from them, but maybe a different level of agreement or service expectations around what we do receive. We do have a hosted environment and there is a lot of frustrations around that.
And this position doesn't relate in any way to the broadband project and
No.
okay.
No.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I was going to ask a little bit on the police staffing plan. I know that this year we had budgeted for a lieutenant position. And that's something that we haven't filled. I assume that's as a result of essentially having not staffed up to get to 24/7 coverage. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's precisely what it is.
Yep. So, over the next 2 years, your leadership structure is proposed to change from a chief and 2 sergeants to a chief, a lieutenant, and 4 sergeants. So that's quite a bit of growth. Can you talk about what that need is and what the benefit is?
Well, right now, we promoted a sergeant just in this pay period, Monday. So we have 3 sergeants, myself, and then I'll call it an anticipated growth perspective. We need to hire 5 more officers before we can grow the agency. And then at that point, then we'll promote a lieutenant within those ranks. So it won't be an additional body. It'll be entailed in our at strength.
Okay. So one of those 3 will be upgraded to a lieutenant?
Yes. Yeah, internally.
Okay. And then we discussed this a little bit last year and the need or lack of need for a full-time detective. And I know last year I took the position that if we're going to be a real department, and I use that not in a derogatory way.
Right.
I respect our agency very much, but that having a trained, dedicated detective that can handle those major cases while rare when they come up are important. Can you talk a little bit about why we're holding that off to 2025 as opposed to next year?
It'll be structured as other duties as assigned. Right now I have 2 interested people. And I would designate them for investigative work right now, but it's not compensated with a pay grade upgrade. But we have 2 people that we can draw from existingly.
Okay. And then over at the middle high school, obviously that building houses more people every year and, that'll be full. Are we okay from a SRO and school safety staffing perspective?
We have 3 SROs designated, but one works, Brian York is up at the middle high school and that's his sole position. So he does not patrol the streets per se, other than just as needed, but he is dedicated to the school system. And in the future, it'll depend on calls for service if we hire additional people, and then we may anticipate a SRO in addition, but that's a couple of years, 3 years downstream.
Okay. Then Chief, can you just talk a little bit, about our plan to get to full strength? I think that, we need 5 is about what you told us a year ago.
It's a challenge. We put one individual through the academy, and unfortunately, he just did not rise to the level that our expectations were. So he was cut loose. We have one right now from the sheriff's department, and to your point, we're on a rating party. We have one additional individual from the sheriff's department, which we anticipate fast tracking. So that'll be, if it's successful, there'll be one less to hire the 5. Right now, we are conducting oral boards for participation in our agency, but it's slim pickings. We generally hire 10% of the candidate pool. So we're ongoing with the anticipated testing. So it's going to be year long.
In terms of being competitive, my sense is from a salary and benefit perspective, we're very competitive with our neighboring agencies. Is that still the case?
It is. It's dollars and cents.
Thank you. Appreciate all that.
Thank you.
I guess I'll just comment on that theme that I'm certainly supportive of a high bar of the applicants you're looking for there, Chief. If it means the numbers fill out a little slower, but we're getting the right people, then I'm supportive of that. So we'll keep at it and appreciate it. Appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
I just want to give you that feedback. And so, any other comments on personnel? I guess I'll just kind of add that, again, appreciate it for staff's work on this. I see all the major categories that we've talked about. We've talked about the engineering needs and a gradual transition that was going to be disruptive or overly expensive to town services, staffing up our police department, as well as some additional recreational services that we're progressing in. So I see all the major categories that we've really been hoping for the last couple of years, and really happy with the progress. So thank you. With that, I think we had a 15-minute break. I think we're a little early, but I think it still makes sense to do a little break before we dive into the capital improvement plan. So it's 4:05, 4:20. We'll get back together and start talking about the plan. Thank you.
I guess I can go. All right. So you guys all have the CIP budget in front of you, which includes roads and buildings and parks and rec. For the most part, a lot of it has stayed the same from last year, just moving forward a year. There has been some changes. We're happy to answer questions on any particular line items you have as we go through it. We're not going to go through it line by line unless you absolutely want us to. But we do have 4 major road projects that we would like to discuss with you this evening in regards to prioritization and sequencing of them that we have revisited, but we want council's input and discussion on in order of where you guys see it as importance in the community. So we can start with those and then circle back to any other questions you have. The 4 projects, just in order on there, are what's identified on the map as F, but it's the Parkway from Busgrove north to Maine with a budget of 3.65 million. This project completes the connection from where the Parkway would end at Busgrove and gets a natural sweep back over to Main Street. Until then, traffic will have to make 2 90-degree turns on Busgrove and then Main Street. The second project is Main Street from Busgrove to Prospect. We have had dollars in there for the last 3-4 years to partner with developers as they developed that section out. So when they did their half, we completed the other half earlier. There's been a development on the list ready to go for the last 3 years and nothing has happened. So nothing in regards to improvements on the north part of Main Street from Busgrove to Prospect has occurred as we thought it would. The third project is Main Street south of Harmony, specifically the Poudre River Bridge. Nothing at that intersection can be done until that bridge is widened in regards to northbound left turn lanes, right turn lane, bike lane, sidewalk. Nothing else can happen until that bridge is addressed. And then the fourth project is Colorado Boulevard, which is from Harmony to Twin Bridge. It was going to reconstruct and widen that. It is the town's responsibility for the section along Timnath Ranch, the west side. It is Windsor on the east side, so future development would assist with that. But we were going to kind of jumpstart that and get that going. In the previous CIPs up until last year, the sequencing of these projects was, as I mentioned, Main Street was going to be occurring already, and it hasn't. Colorado Boulevard is scheduled for construction next year. And I didn't mention it's now a $6.5 million project. Main Street Poudre Bridge was going to be designed in 25, built in 26, 27 was the target for that. And then completing the Parkway north of Busgrove was looking at a design in 26, building it in 27. So now that the Parkway is under construction, approved to start construction next year, comments that were received during the Transportation Master Plan outreach about when are we going to do stuff on Main Street to get sidewalks and bike lanes now at the Timnath Middle High School's up there. The cost increase of the Parkway, looking at how that sequences with everything. Wanted to try to relook at this sequencing, and we have proposed a new sequencing on the CIP, and I wanted to highlight that and then open it for discussion. Really are looking to shuffle things around and advance the completing the Parkway north of Busgrove as the next project after the Parkway. So it advance the design now, and we would be targeting to build it next year with the Parkway construction. So that becomes a natural completion. Then start the Main Street Poudre River Bridge design next year. That's going to take probably a year to complete with the clomers, everything that's required. Looking for construction in 25 and 26. Didn't really want to move that up in advance of completing the Parkway because we didn't want to encourage more traffic to come through this with the 2 90-degree turns at the north end. Then move to working on Main Street from Busgrove to Prospect. Right now looking at 2027. If not done with development, we still have dollars to partner. But that would then, after we get the Parkway done, focus on getting that section done, working in the core of town and moving Colorado Boulevard to the last of that list. We're looking to improve that in 2028.
Might add one quick thing to that is the bridge improvements that Eric was talking about. The other reason for kind of pushing that forward is it's going to dovetail very nicely with the Ladera development and their responsibilities associated with County Road 5. And without having those improvements designed and at least forwarded, it's going to be a conflict there that we'll have a difficult time dealing with. So that it helps that whole section of County Road 5.
The previous plan was based on the previous transportation master plan. We haven't seen traffic increase on Colorado Boulevard as fast as it was indicating it would. We've also received a lot of comments after we did the work on Bus Grove as why were we spending dollars on a road that wasn't traveled heavily? And so that was kind of another factor. So those are our thoughts, but we wanted to open it up to discussion with you guys and your thoughts on how we should be looking to prioritize these from what you're hearing in the community.
On Main Street, Bus Grove to Prospect, you're talking 2 million, 24, 2.2 and 25, and then another 4 million, 27. I assume that's a 2-lane with bike lanes, sidewalks, and then 4 lanes later. Is that breakdown?
Correct. Initial would be 2. The 2 million and 24 and 2.2 and 25 is hoping to partner dollars.
Okay.
Fisher is about a mile of frontage and we're looking to try to complete the east side when they do their west side. But they've had plans on the table for 3 years.
So are
we're-
these dollar amounts that would be matched by the developer or we'd be reimbursed by the developer?
We would be reimbursed by future east side development,
Okay. So not the full amount.
not the full, possibly this full amount, because this is only to complete the east side. The developer on the west side, in this case, we'll use Fisher. They're responsible for building their half.
Okay.
Plus 1 lane the other direction. We would step in instead of just doing 1 lane the other direction. We do the full median, the full lane the other direction, the bike lane and the walk to complete out that road section.
Okay. So we're doing everything from the median
To the
east,
Yep,
and they're doing everything west of that.
correct. Is
with
our
Fisher
hope,
Farm.
is how we were
Okay.
hoping to partner with them.
Okay. Any other of those specific projects you mentioned where there might be developer reimbursements or matching or partnerships of some kind coming? Or in the future? Or
The Colorado Boulevard one for sure. If
Okay.
we were to advance that in advance of development, like the portion to the north, we need to get an agreement with Windsor for their developments to get access and they would cover the cost of the east side. And then if the piece north of Timnath Ranch ever developed, we'd be looking to get reimbursement from that also. But there's no timeframes or developments as to when that would occur.
Okay.
The other one that has, some potential is the extension of Parkway to Prospect that goes through potentially developable ground. And we've yet to be talking to them about anything other than possibly easements. But when that does come, there is some reimbursement potential there.
Okay. But that could be long-term before.
Yeah, very.
Okay. Okay. I guess I'll make one comment before kind of open up to council here. I think where you've put the parkway improvements, particularly Bus Grove North to Main as a top priority, I certainly agree with. I think that is what makes the parkway work, is that you're able to take it all the way up to the full design there. And I think Harmony Road is our biggest traffic issue, and any relief valve we're able to provide to that, I think is a good thing. Allow people to take Prospect. I think with all the high school and middle school traffic, it's a really big deal, particularly with any safety issues with driving on Main Street with that volume of traffic. So I would certainly support that as moving forward, as that part is being brought up. And I'll leave it that for now, and I'll open it up to the rest of the council.
I have a question about the intersection at Main and Prospect. I know that has recently been done. I also know that left turn lane to turn onto Prospect blocks the lane going straight during school rush hours. Is there any plans for any of this funding to do anything to that intersection?
That would be a component of the Main Street Bus Grove to Prospect, because the design would be to widen it out to a 4-lane section ultimately with a median.
Okay, so it would put the
So that
median
left
even up
turn
there.
lane would increase. That was just the short-term minimum they needed
Okay,
to get transitioned back down to the 2 lanes to provide a turn lane there.
okay,
Ultimately, that becomes 2 to 3 times longer than what it is now.
Okay.
It just pushes the improvements further south. So no, it would definitely be part of that.
perfect.
phase.
Because I know I drive in,
Yeah.
drive that way in the morning, and if I time it incorrectly, leaving 2 minutes later from my house increases my time by 15 minutes or something sometimes there. So I agree with some of these main projects being a main focus. And I'm just going to reiterate something that I had heard at the council chat, just because I feel like I have to say that is that people were concerned about Main Street just ending in a cul-de-sac on the south side. So my question is that confirmed, or has there been discussion about that? And just kind of the reasons behind that?
That has been the long-term plan for Main Street from before any of us were here. In that Main Street would no longer be a through connection, was the push of the Old Town residents then. That is how Timnath Landings was platted, and all their design is around. The south side, the last 2-3 houses end in a cul-de-sac. There's an existing road there. It's called Cornhusk, that connects the south end of Main Street back to the Parkway. And so the cul-de-sac is really the last 2 or 3 houses
Turn.
that are south of that,
Okay.
as a way to end the street for those that go past Cornhusk.
Okay.
With the Parkway becoming a major principal arterial, that's where the intersection spacing comes out, is where they are with Cornhusk and then Second.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
I'll just echo what others have said. I think given all the Harmony traffic challenges, I think prioritizing both the Parkway and County Road 5 in the bridge both make sense. So I support that. I suppose I'd be a little more aggressive on trying to also move Colorado forward. Understanding that we can't do all things, but we know that that's coming. But I think your sequencing makes sense.
And I just need further clarification. So of these numbers presented for roads and utilities, is it only 1.1 that we're expecting to be developer reimbursed next year?
All of Parkway improvements, which total 14.550% of that will be reimbursed in 2027.
2027.
Yep.
Okay. And sorry, Lisa, I should know this, but when you run out your, when you presented that graph earlier where
Mhm.
we stand with cash, does that anticipate those?
That does. Yep.
Okay.
And we're actually we've collected 2.5 so far, and it's in restricted funds. Once 2027 hits, that goes away, and then we'll bill for the additional amounts.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I just echo what council said, so thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Yeah. And yeah, I like the general strategy you're approaching here. You're hitting the roads that are the most traveled and will provide the most relief. So, yeah, like that. Any other specific areas in the capital improvement plan you are requesting guidance on?
I have just a couple of quick things.
Great.
Not much at all, actually. I think, we've got a pretty good course charted as far as, so like broadband, for example, I'll pick up right where Eric left off on the table. That's kind of the progress that we talked about the last time with the financial projections. So staying in that lane is where we're planning to be. We are continuing to move that forward right now. With the design and procurement of the front end infrastructure. So that looks like it's moving forward pretty well. On buildings, I did want to just mention that we did add a facilities master plan to the buildings. It's somewhat relevant to the staffing discussion that happened before the break, where as we're adding these people, we need to develop more places for these people to sit. So we've done a little bit of internal reworking in the building already. We'll do a little bit more this year. I just got some drawings from the architect today to actually look through and get those out to bid. But we need to really take a holistic approach to the town. We're growing our departments. We're creating new departments that are growing. We need to make sure that we're providing places for these people to work and house and make sure that they're able to work in the most productive way that they can. I think there's a lot of things that we'll look at, probably, some work from home, some desk share, all those things will probably be kind of discussed in the facilities master plan, but we want to have a long-term goal and a plan that we're going to be enacting over time. Any other questions on facilities?
I'll just make a comment on that, yeah, I would certainly support a master plan on that. I know I've occasionally heard comments that this building in particular is getting a little bit full. And it is designed to expand at some point. I would need to see some justification that we're using the police building, this building, the public works building, that we are using those to their capacity before I would support an expansion on this. So I appreciate the efforts to really examine how we're going to fully use all our space.
Moving on to parks. Really the approach on parks is the same as it was last year. We kind of tweaked a couple things around now that we have the approved master plan for Wild Wing, and we're going to be bidding that here. Hopefully by the end of the week, we're going to get that on the street. These projects are kind of moving forward as we do more design, get more direction. We can kind of dial in those numbers a little bit more. The only thing that I did want to mention is, we did push the T-Rock Trail from 23 to 24. We do see a light at the end of the tunnel there. As we previously discussed, there was a gap where we didn't have any access from kind of 2/3 of the way to Busgrove to get to Busgrove. There's a new development. It was in front of you guys last week or 2 weeks ago that will help us kind of make that connection. So we're getting pretty excited about making that happen next year. On the reservoir, we will probably do some outreach next year and talk about some amendments to the master plan as we've been getting feedbacks from the residents and want to try to incorporate a couple other amenities that weren't originally contemplated in the master plan there. So that's the money you'd see next year, and then continuing to build out the trail and potentially some of those new amenities in the following year. We've got Wild Wing Park in there, and then we've got a bunch of parks that are coming up where we'll start master planning processes, do community outreach. You guys will start seeing those happening later. Next year, we'll start some more master planning. And then those things will really start to take shape. And once we understand what the amenities are, what the master plan looks like, we can kind of refine those numbers. But for right now, we've kind of just taken some ballpark per acre costs and kind of allocated those out for the ones that don't have master plans. We did also push out the open space acquisition. There was a little discussion earlier about the Prost master plan that we talked about doing. So we'll focus on kind of that open space acquisition as part of that master planning, and then we'll be able to bring that back for some recommended actions. Any other questions on parks?
Have we done all of our 2023 expenses on the Poudre River Trail, and are we essentially done with all of our contributions there?
We have not. There's been a couple of things that have kind of expanded the time frame on that. Some of that money will probably get pushed into next year. On the other side of the river, Fort Collins is having some challenges with their floodplain. And then as they were doing some investigatory work, they have some archaeological issues that they're having to deal with. So that's pushed their time frame back until probably construction. Hopefully they're hoping early next year. And then on the other end of Timnath, we're partnering with Larimer County. And I think that is probably still going to happen this year. So some of that stuff will probably happen this year. Some of that will happen next year. We are also partnering with Windsor, Larimer County, Greeley for a combined signage program. And we've got that moving forward, but some of those costs might push into next year as well.
I have heard and seen some resident concerns about why isn't Timnath being more assertive in getting the Poudre Trail done. And essentially most of the hangups are outside of our town limits, correct?
Yeah, we don't actually have any trail construction to speak of. There's a little bit at the very south end, but it made more sense to make a combined project with Larimer County as they have probably 67% of that, and we have a third of that where we're going to match funds for that, but it's all one construction project that they're going to manage. So, we really have most of that route taken care of. We're kind of holding back on putting a lot of signage and things up until we get those connections, because we don't want people to end up at a dead end saying, okay, well, I thought I was going, I was just following the Poudre Trail signs. I thought I was going to Greeley, and all of a sudden you're, kind of at the end of the road.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Couple thoughts I'll throw out there. I mean, I think I'm fine with the numbers there as a placeholder for now, but I'm looking at the Timnath Ranch Park, the space north of Bethke. I'm a little concerned, looking at the numbers of what it costs to do the other parks, the Wild Wing Park, you look at that, however, millions that is. It looks like the Timnath Ranch Park schedule is either going to slip or I think it'd be a challenge to hit the level of programming that people expect from the parks with the dollar amounts there. And I know it's premature to say that because we haven't done any surveys, we haven't done any outreach, we haven't done any kind of planning on it yet. I want to express that I see an area of risk there in terms of being able to follow this plan. So it'll be something to keep an eye on. And it may just be people want a lot there, so it means we have to wait an extra year, and that's just will be how it is. And then the open space acquisition, when we acquire these spaces, as mentioned in our reports here, that comes with extra maintenance costs to the town and things like that. So I want to make sure as we get to 2027 or whenever we start to acquire more of this open space, we have a clear plan in mind. I don't know if pros committee's even talked about this subject, but at some point, what are we buying the land for? Are we buying it for a park? Are we buying it for guiding development? Are we buying it because we don't want development? just whatever our plan is. And again, I know we're a little premature on that, but it'd be worth giving some thought ahead of time.
In my mind, that is open space acquisition is not area for future parks. We do have some revenue streams that would be ground for future park development, but this would probably be, areas where we want to provide community separators to Windsor or Fort Collins or Severance. This is places where there's some sensitive habitat that we want to open up, but we don't want to develop it. I'm not saying that it would be closed, but it's probably very low impact. It's just, some trails to go through there with a soft parking lot, or those kind of experiences would be what I would vision the open space acquisitions for, rather than the more developed parkland.
Okay. And yeah, that'll come into play with any land that is identified as something we might want to buy and how we would want to use that. So, but never too early to give that some concrete thought. So, I like what you've got here. And with that, I'll be quiet and open any other comments, questions on the parks. Nope. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else on the CIP there?
So you have questions on stormwater?
Anybody want to talk stormwater? All right, I think we're good with stormwater. We're in favor of not having it here. With that, I think I turn over to you here, Aaron, right?
Yeah, that's right, Brett. And so really that represents the formal presentation part by the staff. I think from our standpoint, we would first give you guys a chance for any comments or questions of any of the things we've covered tonight. Sort of, I don't want to say last call, but a little bit of a last call. So I'll do that now.
So next year, I'd really like to maybe if we can incorporate the SWOT analysis into this, or maybe during our state of the town sometime, because I think you guys did the work and I'd like to know more about that in the future. The other, I just have general line item questions, if we can just go through those. If you guys are okay with that. Let me find it here. So Lisa, line 74 on the expense budget, there's no annexation fees for 2024, and it appears that we didn't budget these for 2023 as well. Is that something we just, how does that work?
We just count that as they occur and come in. They're really hard to predict when they're going to happen
Okay,
and the fees associated with those.
okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So that's more of, we just leave that open and it's a positive to our budget when it
Exactly.
occurs.
Mhm.
Okay. The line 171 for signal maintenance. We've had 8,600. We budgeted 150. We're estimated finish out the year at 40. Can we understand why we're going to budget for 150 again there?
We had budgeted this year to try to get some real-time telemetry and access to the control cabinets, particularly along Harmony. That method was all going to be by radio links for sequence. So that when somebody calls and says, you know, at Walmart, I can't get out because the light's not turning green, somebody at Public Works can immediately jump into the system, put in a recall, see what the issue is. Because often when we get out to the signal, it's operating normally and we don't know what was causing the problem. So we were looking at, that was the reason for the increased budget this year. But with Pulse coming in, who we ended up with, we're looking at the fiber and running the broadband.
Yep.
And running fiber along the corridor. That gives us a much faster, more secure network to tap into to provide those connections. That's what the city of Loveland uses. So we delayed that to next year. And so that's why this year's budget went down and next year's went up to shift that, providing that remote access into next year's budget.
Okay. And with that, do you see with any of that signal maintenance, is it just more data, better data, or is it simply time of event? Look at that. I guess just don't understand.
Right now, it's more time of event and being able to access remotely and make changes into the system remotely. Because by the time we get a call, it's, you know, the signal's not working right. It takes us time to get out there. Where if Cody or I can get into the system from Public Works building, we can immediately put the signal into recall and get traffic flowing again while we investigate what the problem is. It gives that. In the future, that provides other ways to go to an adaptive signal programs, more advanced traffic signals that need to talk to each other. But that's way down in the future. Right now, we're just trying to establish base communication between each of our cabinets to increase efficiency in maintaining those. Because right now, the only way to see anything is to physically go out to the cabinet.
Out there. Thank you, Eric.
Yep.
I forgot to ask this, and I should have asked it in the CIP. We've got nothing in the budget for Walmart for next year. Are you continuing to see better traffic out there and that with the striping and all that going on?
We are seeing better implementation or usage of it. One of the reasons we pulled it out was some feedback I thought we were receiving from council members is why have something in there if we don't have an actual plan?
Yep.
And so that's why we pulled it out. Just not to have money for a placeholder without a plan right now. If there are changes that need to be done in addition or something else comes up, we'd then come back and ask for that specific item to be funded.
Yeah, I think I was the one that asked. So I just want to make sure.
I don't remember who it came from.
It was me. I just want to make sure that we're seeing kind of that. Then as expected, we're continuing with it. Okay.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's an area we continue to monitor and watch all the time. And also to be clear, we think it has improved and the striping has educated people and they are getting better and the situation is not getting any worse and mostly getting better.
Okay. Thank you, guys. And last one I have is a line item was 184, line 184 for parks and maintenance. I know we're adding parks. Can you just walk me through going from 644 to maybe 900 and what that budget looks like?
Yeah, that 900 includes the postmaster plan. It includes 2 new pickup trucks and it includes the replacement of 2 mowers. In addition, we're seeing increased costs related to the splash pad at Community Park. So those are new costs that are included. That's why it's up so much.
And you said 2 trucks, Lisa?
Mhm.
And that's not capital?
We include it as in each department under their maintenance budget. So like Public Works vehicles are included in Public Works and the same thing with parks. We are looking at a GL restructure and we might change that next year.
Okay.
But that's driving that number up.
Thank you, guys. Sorry, get in the weeds.
I was just going to ask about the public safety budget and, that's going up well over $1 million. We've added a couple of new positions, but is that essentially we've had salary savings this year that we haven't spent out or?
Exactly. We budgeted that we would have all of the positions filled and we're still down 3 officers. And so next year's budget is reflective of that as well. I imagine we'll have some vacancy savings again, depending on the hiring.
I ask on that one every year. So Chief likes to be conservative with what he's looking for on staffing salaries. So
He's hopeful he can fill them,
he is optimistic. He's an optimistic man. That's why we like him. So any other comments, questions? Great. Well, thank you to staff for being so prepared and being able to respond to all of our questions and provide all this information. Do you feel like you got all the information and feedback you needed for the budget? Everything's clear. All right.
I'm seeing a lot of nods. I think we're good. We know how to get hold of you if we need to.
You know how to find me. With that, I guess we wrap up.
Yeah, I think the only other thing we would want to touch on is just that reminder of the time frame. So based on the feedback we have tonight, we have a few things we'll change. Really not a lot, but we'll put this out publicly first of the month, open up that window for the public comment. Takes us into November where we'll have the first reading and setting the public hearing for December for final adoption. And I think I speak for all the staff. We appreciate the feedback tonight. And you guys helping make it a relatively painless process for us all. And we sure appreciate your service on the council. Probably should motion to adjourn.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.